just pristine access and healthcare, right? Just
Mhm.
and so it's hard for scaling more than most, whatever. But rather than looking at all the barriers and trying to fit something in there, it's just I'm doing it the other way around. I'm just doing it.
Hope you enjoy the conversation this week with Bryan Fine, CEO and physician at Percentric. Thanks. Welcome to this week's episode of Leadership Soundbites with Bryan Fine, Doc, owner, founder, and Doc in Percentric. And I thank you for coming back. I've watched you, and like you and I talked about before I hit record, is I've watched I'm going to call it evolution, okay, of Bryan Fine and your message and what happens on LinkedIn. And one of the things that struck me is just you're staying the course, the consistency of it, the message that you have around, and the tagline around let patients text. I think there's power in staying constant, and yet you've also got this authenticity about you. So I want to read the quote, and then I want to start a conversation with you. Do not follow where the path may lead. Go instead where there is no path and leave a trail. Ralph Waldo Emerson. And so what I mentioned to you before we hit record is I've watched you blaze the trail where there is no path. You are doing stuff in your business that other healthcare and the way we're structured is not doing. And you are leaving a trail. And I've watched the number of people that you're connecting with and resonating with on LinkedIn increase. And as a leader, that's kind of our purpose, is you now have followers and people that are engaged in what you're talking about that weren't in the conversation before. So I know you don't necessarily have that same perspective, or maybe you do. What's on your brain?
Yeah, I appreciate it, Michelle. I think you're right. It's certainly not for the faint of heart as far as blazing a new trail. And there's a lot of power, maybe power again, not the right word, as far as these sayings and make it seem like easy. Blazing new trails, especially in healthcare. I mean, anywhere, but blazing new trails it's challenging, and it's been, there's professional ramifications, there's socio-domestic ramifications potentially, but at the end of the day, there is something nice about building your own thing and being able to say that you're doing, you love what you do. So I'm in that space right now, and I think, as you've discussed, I think it comes out in how I'm trying to present myself. I think it speaks to, a journey on something like LinkedIn or any sort of social media space where you're trying to find, a little bit of a brand or a little bit of a identity. And the texting thing, I think it's got double meanings. Obviously there's the very specific, let's patients text. And then there's the sort of more general, just access, this is different. You can look at different things. You can challenge the status quo, all of that stuff. So it's been neat. It's been neat to lean into. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because it is, while your tagline is let patients text, there, to your point, it's more to it. It's about access, and there isn't a single healthcare organization out there that doesn't have access as one of their goals, strategy, pillars, whatever you call it. Okay, that's one of the main things that they're working on. One of several, right? Because usually there's several. But I think the thing that I've seen, Bryan, and me being on the outside looking in, is that we're starting to, and I think this is what we need to do as leaders, is make a stand, stay constant, make a stand, have a voice, have a perspective, and then watch what happens as people start going, oh, I agree with that. I feel the same way. And to your point, then offline, we're making connections, to people to where we're having conversations, we're understanding the synergies. Maybe we're going to end up in a place that we can partner with somebody that's going to give us the oomph, right, that we need. And be able to say, okay, so it's not just me on my own, that I've got to have the energy to stay constant this whole time. Someone else, maybe when I'm down, they're going to be up and we're going to go forward. But I think we can't make those connections, the real connections to people that resonate with what we're trying to do, unless we're consistent and we're honest and authentic about what it is we're actually trying to do. And you're doing that.
I think so. Yeah, I'm certainly trying. And again, I appreciate that. There's some other people as well. I think, the LinkedIn space makes it a challenge when you're trying to bridge and not get too Facebooky or, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I've posted a couple times with like pictures of my kids, which I'm comfortable doing sort of ideologically, but I'm also sensitive to doing, lest be seen as some sort of, clickbait or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But it's right. It's a big part of all of us, of me, and I think I'm still still poking around there, because at the end of the day, like let's be frank, I think LinkedIn has an end goal of generating income and revenue for people, right? It's a sales thing. It could be a long play sales thing. I mean, certainly. But you're trying to find what are these avenues, the networking that it allows. And obviously it's not supposed to be a LinkedIn commercial. But what I'm trying to do with my voice, wherever I am, just to be honest, like not even on social media, but what I'm trying to do with my voice is I get to say something that doesn't feel salesy to me, right? I'm not saying let patients text buy from me. I'm saying something else, and it does it gives me a sense of peace, purpose. It's helped me define who I am with my kids and like what daddy does. So in every way, it's been nice, and I help patients. I mean, that's just the end of the story, right? That's the thing. It helps people.
Yeah. No, I think it's cool because when I see the stuff that you share and the barriers that you remove and the connections that you make and the check-ins, we're humans we're always looking for a human connection, whether or not we admit that we are, okay? And the fact that someone's able to get questions answered, someone's able to have their voice heard, it's powerful stuff because lacking that, when you're calling, I had an experience this morning, I'm calling to someone else, I've got an issue that I need help resolving, and they're going, that's all I can tell you. Fine, then put me on the phone or connect me with someone else who can tell me more, because that's not enough. I mean, I get your limitations, so put me in contact with someone else who doesn't have those same limitations.
Correct.
It's the same thing that you're doing. You're giving a resolution, a solution, another path, if you will. Right. And so when I go back to the quote, because I remember your comment is early before we hit record is, well, I'm not really leaving a trail. There's no blazing of a trail. But if you think about it, if you're a kid, let's say that, and you've got this whole backyard with a forest, and now I'm going to have you imagine something that you may or may not have grown up with. And then you growing up and you're walking back through the grasses and stuff and then in through the trees, and you do this constantly, right? Every day. By the time you're 3 years old, or maybe, 3 years down the road or 4 years down the road, I don't know how long it takes, there's going to be a path there.
Yeah.
There's got to be a path where there was no path before. It happens with cattle, it happens with everything else. And all of a sudden, it's a path that someone else can come along and go, oh, let me follow this path. That's what you're doing. That's what we as leaders can do.
I think that's fair. I would say, I think I maybe misunderstood the quote initially, but I agree with that. And I usually use the analogy. I've told people this for years. I mean, when I first started doing this 6-7 years ago, both with, the medical practice and then the software itself, as far as texting, I've told people, like, I don't know if I'm going to be the one who spikes the ball in the end zone. Right. I might just get us between the 20s, take us closer, but I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to be the one. There's somebody who is smarter, more well-connected, has more money or whatever, who probably could take what I'm doing right now and take it in a direction. And but I do feel that I am, yes, blazing a path that I like, that I think's a good path. As I told you, earlier, like I have people reaching out. Both because they like what I do, and then also certainly middle-aged physicians. I think I told you, last time we spoke, I don't see a lot of happy 50-year-old physicians, because
Mm-hmm.
as the evolution of healthcare comes and you're working for other people, but you're also developing your own skill sets and your own, desires for autonomy, like the strain between high level and, healthcare admin and physicians becomes even more so. And
Mm-hmm.
to have built this, and with the potential that it could, put food in my kids' bellies and pay for their school. And I'm at the bus every day they get off, like all of those things. My deathbed, there's not gonna be a lot of deathbed regrets.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I appreciate it. And, sort of pot committed to the message, that's for sure.
Yeah, I do me a favor because I realized I know your story. Your second time on the podcast. Can you just give people the elevator pitch of what you do and
Yeah.
how you're different in what you're delivering with healthcare as a doc?
Yeah, no, my healthcare delivery model is I go to businesses and I say, for a fee, which is probably less than you pay your brokers to put together your plan, but for a fee, I'll be available to all your employees, by text message, regular text message, right? They don't have to download anything. I'll be available to them. I'll be available to their family members, and we'll try. And they can ask me any question they want that they don't feel is an urgent question,
Mm-hmm.
and we will work on it, and we will stay in touch until we get it moving in the right direction. It could be several days, but and so they'll have a name of a doctor. It's not a 24/7 coverage, but it's also not just navigation. It's in between.
Mm-hmm.
We solve stuff and we navigate and we care. And they and so that's the medical model. And on then I built the software platform, so it's sort of a built-in medical record,
Mm-hmm.
that is, completely transparent. I mean, the patient doesn't see it at all because
Right.
they don't generally need to, right? So they think they're texting my cell phone, and it goes into a platform for posterity and sort of medical record keeping. And I license that out to other healthcare, small healthcare providers. And so I've built these two. They obviously, the Venn diagram overlaps considerably.
Mm-hmm.
Each one is very different, in, pros and cons to that. But I love it. It's a silo, right? So we talk about that as a 4-letter word, which literally, but from the figurative perspective, it's always been thought of as a negative. But when you're trying to solve things, and I'm okay in my little silo, where I also, I can poke out into the system if I need to and try and find ways. But there's a lot of healthcare stuff that's just not that complicated. People just need a
Mm-hmm.
little help. And sure, I mean, if everybody could reach out to a primary care doctor, and get responses,
Mm-hmm.
great, go there. I mean, I get to tell people, go to your primary care doctor. If you don't need me, by all means, go somewhere.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, and it works. Patients love it. I like it. My clients, the business that I work with, like it. Um, and it lets me live and breathe and be happy.
You're solving a one of the many healthcare gaps that exist, right? At least in the US. I don't know about others with different models, delivery care models of healthcare. And I have to believe that people have noticed a difference, improvement, if you will, right? Because the model that you're doing too is it helps people manage things before they become acute episodes of something, right? Because if you're not there doing that stuff, people go longer before they end up in healthcare. And so then they're in the ED, which is the most expensive place that you can get care. So I can imagine there's costs. And if you've got employers that are self-funded plans, that matters a great deal.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree with you. And, the challenge for the value proposition is that, the payer ultimately, isn't always very clear cut with any
Mhm.
individual episode. Even within a company, how much money do you save if you prevent someone from an ER visit, if that particular employee has a high deductible plan that they would be paying the $5,000 themselves, and right, like the company wouldn't be paying it, right? Where's the value proposition in that? You're helping the employee potentially, and then there's potentially regulatory nonsense around that. But you're in that particular instance, you may not be helping the company. So looking at it from a longer term perspective, what we're seeing with self-insured companies now is that they're insurers, they're payers.
Yes.
And they fall into the same trap that insurance companies do then, which is, investing in Michelle's 3-year, 5-year horizon may not matter for me because there's a good chance she's not going to be with me 3 or 5 years, right? I'll pay for all this preventive stuff, and then she'll go somewhere else, and some other insurer will reap that reward. And to say that, insurers all sort of get in bed with each other in a positive way to, know that that'll all pay off at a broad scale if they all do that for each other. Like, I don't think we're there, right? So everybody, looks still fairly narrow. I get asked, well, what can how can you save me money in the next year or two? And my response is like, well, I think, right, the emphasis on outcomes, like, obviously I believe that there's outcome are important. I also think there are things that are self-evident that don't need research, peer review stuff to do and know that they're right. And so yeah, certainly the space that I'm in, it just makes too much sense. And
Yeah.
so it's interesting to.
So here's where my brain went, right? Is that while I agree with you, the employers that are self-insured fall into the insurer, the payer trap, if you will. But there's a different aspect to it with self-employed, self-insured rather, employers than you have in your typical Blues, right? Blue Cross, Blue Shield, Anthem, UHC, whatever it may be. Is that with the employer, the self-insured employer, the other part of that is if I am able to avoid or have helping my employees avoid those acute episodes, right? Maybe I'm in the ED, I'm potentially and most likely avoiding LOAs, medical leaves of absence, all that stuff, which is a huge cost to employers, right? A huge cost. And so I think that's the other part of the proposition, the value proposition, if you will. The other thing that comes to mind for me is the mindset that employees show up with. If they feel heard and engaged and valued and all the other stuff, they're going to show up with this more positive mindset. They're cared for, right? Then people that get into this negative loop trap of nobody cares about me, nobody's listening, because it's pretty easy to fall into, and I've watched it happen more and more since COVID. So if you have employees, or let me say if, when you have employees that show up with a positive mindset, you have a group of individuals that are more productive, they engage more with other people, they make happier they provide better experiences for the customers that you serve. But the thing is we have to be able to look at that and just start measuring stuff. Even if we did a Likert scaled survey, I'm just going to make crap up right now, is that we said, okay, fine, after 1 month on this program or 3 months on the program to where people are utilizing, Bryan, what you have to do is ask people, I want you to look back and rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 5 based on these things being true, these statements, right? Where were you before you started with your experience with healthcare before? Where are you now? Because that backward look, people can look back and go, oh my God, I was a train wreck. I was miserable. I had no faith in the system. And now it's like, I actually have someone who's responding to me. I used to go to the ED because you have frequent flyers, X times whatever. And my gosh, I don't remember the last time I went.
Yeah.
But these kind of things are ways that we don't have to have white paper evidence or controlled, trials of something. That we can literally have experiences that people are having, and we can do it after the fact and have them look back. Because if we do it at the beginning, they don't necessarily have anything to look at. Or have people go, God, I never surveyed in the beginning. That's fine. Survey them now. Say, where were you before and where do you feel you are now, and rate yourself. And you're going to be blown away by the results. But I think stuff like that is what we need to do to have evidence, data points, of the fact that this is in fact working.
Yeah, I agree. And it's interesting you say. I mean, obviously you're preaching to the choir on this, but
Yes.
my experience has been is that it's the exception of an employer. Like, some of my best clients are fully insured, Michelle. Like, they already pay, but they're leaning into what I do because they believe in it. And those are my best clients
I
are
love that.
essentially fully insured because they understand, to me, like what I'm trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
There is no guarantee, but I certainly go through a lot of pitches where, um, as much as people want to be able to adopt and, as it seems self-evident that happy employees that show up are a good thing,
Mm-hmm.
it frequently just comes down to a more actuarial, sort of sterile
Mm-hmm.
review of numbers directly related to healthcare and healthcare benefits. I,
So
I,
go ahead. I'm sorry. I
Listen, I
brainwashed.
call what I do a hug benefit more than a health benefit. Like, it is intended to, you really got to want to take care of your people. That has to be
Yes.
the message that resonates with you.
Yes. Yes. So, and I agree with you, because when you said that, it's like self-insured or not, it's the right thing to do. I want to care for people. I recognize the gap that exists there. So I'm curious, Bryan, because the people that are your best customers that are fully insured that still want to do this, what have they given you as feedback? What have they noticed?
I mean, they've noticed that their employees show up, that their employees are happy, that, I know all their employees. They've used, oftentimes, right, the executive and HR leaders have used it themselves, so they get a firsthand sense, of what I can do. And so while they may not see the value of one employee sort of front line not missing a day of work, if I can get the CEO on the plane to close a deal a little bit
Mm-hmm.
easier, right? And some of that takes time.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so um yeah, yeah, yeah.
This is my improvement part of me, right? I would love, 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 if you've not done it already, and you can follow with me later if you're interested in doing this, is go to them and ask them, what are their turnover rates now? What are they like? What are their LOAs? What are employee sat surveys, depending on how long people have been with you over like periods of time. So if you've had someone that you've been with for, 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, 4 years, whatever it is, that trending would be interesting numbers to look at.
Yeah, I think that's tricky. And maybe I'm just making, again, excuses are here. Like, there's so many variables
Oh no,
associated with those things. And so, to the extent
I
that you're
agree.
getting into sort of statistical analyses of why this year, it's like, I mean, I'll use a heart attack. If I come in and I say, I'm going to decrease your healthcare expenses, which I don't say anymore. I mean, I think
No,
I,
no.
but I don't know how many heart attacks are going to happen in the next 3 years. I don't know how many premature babies and how many cancers. And, you might, hit a blip or whatever. Like, I don't know, but my sense is that, and I think this is just common sense. My sense is that it'll be better with something like my access in place, right?
Mhm.
I'm not going to make it worse. I'm not. No, I mean, maybe because you pay me, if you think worse is the money that you pay me. But I'm not going to make sort of the healthcare situation worse. I'm not going to make your employees less happy. I'm not going to,
Yeah.
and so, um, all you're going to do is get wins. And so, to the extent that you put those blocks together, I really feel this way. I'm talking to people, like, I might could present a spreadsheet for you that shows, that manipulates data in the way that everybody knows we can manipulate data. And, there's lies, and there's damn statistics, right? So I could do that, but I think there's something really self-evident, given the complexity and the challenges in healthcare. There's something that's just self-evident about what I do. And that might not be the right approach. It might not be the best salesy approach. I've certainly had people being sort of passionately, and compassionately critical of it, like, because they like what I do and they want me to
Mhm.
have success. And in order to do it, you need to be able to lay out these numbers and these things. And, certainly there's something to that. But yeah, I have found the complexity of healthcare combined with, like, sort of my approach, has made sort of laying that out, not as easy as I thought.
Yeah. So I'm bobbleheading with you, and I hear a lot of that. I'm not saying that you can look at it and say there's a direct correlation, right? But what I'm curious about, and this is curiosity, Bryan, because I have a gut feeling, okay, is that you start looking at this stuff, that you're going to see some sort of a trend or things show up. And you're going to see that, and especially if you took numbers before and later, yeah, the organization's probably doing other things. You've got organizations that care about their people, and they probably always care about their people. But to say that, hey, I'm not taking credit for all this movement, but I'm saying during the time that here's pre and here's post to what's been happening, I was a part of this. So, which is a different approach than saying that was me, that's what we did. No, but you can't deny the fact that if there is an improvement over time, you were part of the mix. And
rising
I
ship,
think that's I
right?
think that's an important thing to look at. So that's where my curiosity comes in. And
Rising
yeah, I
tides,
did.
rising
Yeah,
tides, rising tides lift all ships. It's like when you hire somebody. I've tried to sort of pitch in the space of, I'm on your team. Like, when
yeah,
you hire a VP level person, yes, there are metrics, but there's also a je ne sais quoi about the whole thing. Like,
yes.
you're trying, you want people to like their boss. You want people to like the direction and the spirit. And I'm trying to, lean into that value proposition as much as anything else.
Yeah. So I want to loop us back, right? Because I so appreciate this time and value what's going on. Is we started off in this space with a quote around, if there is no trail, don't follow that trail, basically blaze your own. And I think what I'm hearing from you two and what others come up against, if you're doing stuff that's not the norm, that hasn't been done before, then it's important for us to be open-minded and start turning over all these other rocks to say, okay, what else is there that I'm not seeing? How do I articulate that this is air quote working, right? That, or this is making a difference, or this is the right thing to do. And it's not easy because not everyone else is doing it and citing the fact that, oh, here's the reason that we know this stuff works. And so I encourage not only you, but anyone else who may be on this path of doing things that haven't been done before routinely, to don't be afraid to go in and start turning rocks over to where, okay, if I'm doing this stuff, yeah, I just at my gut, I know it's the right thing to do. But what else potentially could it impact? And let's just start looking from curiosity and then sit back and wonder if we're seeing the trends of our gut tells us that, okay, what else is going on then? And could there be an indirect correlation? Could I have been a contributor to what else is going on? But that's where I encourage you and I encourage others as well as myself, that it hasn't been done before. And if it hasn't been done before, people haven't identified all this stuff.
One thing
And
I
so,
say, at some point, like him or hate him, right? At some point, Elon Musk had to sit in front of somebody and say, yeah, yeah, but these are electric cars, right?
yeah,
Because this there's this world around vehicles, there's this world around healthcare. And that's kind of my space. It's like at some point I'm like, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but this is really it is different, not in a salesy way, in a risk my life, um, try to do, this is different. And so some of the regulatory stuff, some of the medical practice guidelines and best practices that, are 40 years old or 30 years old that were, crafted in a different era, like this is different.
yeah,
Um, and if we start, what I think I'm doing, maybe, I'm starting from what I consider to be just pristine access and healthcare, right? It's just,
mm-hmm.
and so it's hard for scaling more than most, whatever. But rather than looking at all the barriers and trying to fit something in there, it's just I'm doing it the other way around. I'm
Mm-hmm.
just doing it, right?
Yes,
Doing what,
yes,
and then when people say, well, you can't do that because of this, the government says this, or because there's this law rule, or like, all right, well then maybe, okay, I don't maybe agree with that, or maybe there's a gray area, or there's some creativity that we can talk into, or I'm open to all of that. But you obviously know what I do is a good thing because you would do it, or you already do it because you're somebody in an executive suite who happens to have friends who are doctors. Like you're already doing what I do, or you have that
yeah.
access. So it's nice where I can certainly lean into some version of hypocrisy with naysayers. Like, I mean, that this is awesome. Like, it is, and whatever excuses you're making, okay, sure. But let's figure it out together.
Well, and I think it's flipping the question. So I so appreciate your time, the and just the trail that you are blazing, because you are blazing a trail, even though you may think that you're just kind of cruising along right now. I appreciate that. And so I love the idea that we're going to flip it from it can't be done, it's not being done today, to how can we, and let's go try. Bryan, thank you for your time. This has been Leadership Soundbites. Please like, share, subscribe. If you have a topic you want to chat or you want to reach out to Bryan, do so. He's on LinkedIn and very active. So thank you and have an awesome day.